Believe it or not, Messi, Suarez, and Neymar played together at Barcelona for only 3 seasons together. Together, they formed one of the best attacks in modern football history, winning 2 La Ligas, 3 Copa del Reys, and 1 Champions League title. But what if it never ended? Neymar never left for PSG, and the trio continued to dominate and conquer all of Europe. So that's exactly what we're going to do today. I am back in the last FIFA that they were together, which was FIFA 17, and I'm going to take over as manager to make MSN dominate Europe once again. So this is the starting 11 here at Barcelona on FIFA 17. Of course, we have MSN up top, Messi, Suarez, and Neymar. In the midfield, we have legends such as Iniesta, Busquets, and a very underrated player in Rakitic. The back line, Jordi Alba is at left back, Mascherano and Piqué as the center backs, with Sergi Roberto on the right, as well as Ter Stegen in net. But for this challenge, our goal is to win back-to-back trebles, and it must include the La Liga and the UCL title. The third trophy can either be the Super Cup, the Copa del Rey, some other major trophy, but we must win the UCL as well as La Liga. And of course, we must use MSN the entire time. But looking back at the team, I'm actually going to start Andre Gomez because if any of you remember, this is the FIFA where he was absolutely crazy. I think he has 90 potential. He was absolutely insane back in the older FIFAs, so he's definitely going to start. Mascherano is getting up there in age. He is 32 years old, and he's just not going to be around for when we win our back-to-back trebles, so I want to upgrade there. As well as Sergi Roberto, he is our starting right back. I think we can do better than that. He's also a center mid playing right back. I don't think he's really developed as a right back at this point in his career, so I want to look for a right back as well. And for season 1, we have an initial budget of just over 100 million, so that should be plenty of money to bring in those 2 upgrades. So as our first order of business, we have a player departure. It is Mascherano. He is headed out of the club to Manchester City. We sold him for 23 million. Not too bad. Next up, we went in for a brand new right back. He was basically my best option. It is Serge Aurier, 83 rated. He's got a ton of potential. He should be a brilliant player on the right side. There's not really anyone else that I wanted to bring in. But before we could go any further, we had our first opportunity at a trophy with the Supercopa versus Sevilla. And in the first leg, it was a 2-0 victory, and that was followed by a 2-1 loss. But that does mean we did win the Supercopa 3-2 on aggregate, giving us our first trophy of the season. A brilliant start, if I say so myself. Next up, we had another departure out of the club. It is the Turkishman Arda Turan. He was headed off to Chelsea for around 30 million. We have too many center mids, and I am not planning on using him, so he has left the club for Chelsea for 30.5 million. So that was followed by a major signing that we made. It was for Bayern Munich's Jerome Boateng in the absolute prime of his career. We might have overspent a little bit, but I really wanted to bring him in. We signed him from Bayern Munich for 87 million, a hefty fee, but a brilliant player we're getting back in return. Besides our signings and departures, we had a couple of loans out of the club, most notably in Rafinha and Denis Suarez. But besides that, this is how the team looks like going into Season 1. I like our upgrades. We have a brand new right side of the defense for this team, and all we have to do now is see how we do in the first season. So having a look at the UCL, we were in a group with Bayer Leverkusen, FC Basel, and Warsaw. And in those group stage matches, we started off with a win against FC Basel, a win against Warsaw, a massive 3-0 victory against Bayer Leverkusen, another win against Basel, our first loss against Leverkusen 1-0, and finally another win against Warsaw. So that meant at the end of the group stage, we were top on 15 points going through with Bayer Leverkusen. We could not have asked for a better group stage performance. Looking back at La Liga, it wasn't our best stretch of games. Dropping points to the likes of Valencia as well as a loss to Real Madrid found us in 6th place come January 1st, not exactly where we wanted to be in our first season. We found ourselves a whopping 17 points behind Real Madrid. We needed a major second half of the season if we wanted to compete for the La Liga title. As we were in January, we had the Copa del Rey round of 16 where we lost the first leg to Real Betis as well as drew the second leg, meaning that we were unexpectedly out of the Copa del Rey in the round of 16 a lot earlier than I expected to be. But all we had to do was shift our attention back onto the UCL and La Liga. So I decided to sign a backup CDM, and I chose a young man, Leon Goretzka, before he went to Bayern Munich. We sent 25 million Schalke's way for his signature. He's going to be a decent backup CDM for Busquets if he ever gets injured. And as we hit deadline day, the only business was Goretzka, but I noticed something in the bottom right-hand corner. Manchester City had bought Cristiano Ronaldo for 84 million. Yeah, I had to check. Cristiano Ronaldo actually went to Manchester City, something that just would never happen. And they got a good deal for him. He's worth 100 million. I don't know how they've managed to pull this off, but just wanted to add that in, a little interesting part of the video. But deadline day came to a close and we were back focusing on the UCL. And for that, I decided to hop into our round of 16 match against Moscow, which I thought was going to be a walk in the park. But how wrong that would be. In the first half, no real chances from either side, a stalemate 0-0 going into halftime. But in the second half, a disaster struck, a cross in to Moscow striker Traore. He headed it home past Ter Stegen, putting us down 1-0. Very unexpectedly, this is not what I wanted. And for the rest of the first leg, we could not break them down, so we ended up losing the first leg 1-0 against Moscow. Not a great start. And in the second leg, a lot rested on this game. If we would advance, my pride for playing older FIFAs, a lot rested on this match. And we had a great start to the match as Sergio Busquets was found in the box, who finessed it home, a banger off of the crossbar and down. An absolute screamer to start us off. We were up 1-0 in the second leg, putting us tied on goal difference against Moscow. But unfortunately, no other goals would take place in the entirety of regular time, so that meant we were on to extra time. And in extra time, we had a chance to take the lead. Neymar found Andre Gomez in the box on his strong foot, but he hit the post, forcing it wide. And with that, our only opportunity, we ended extra time, which meant we were going into penalties. And I'm going to be honest, this is probably the most embarrassing penalty shootout I've ever witnessed. I really did not know how to take penalties in this game. We first stepped up, Luis Suarez smashed home his first penalty, just barely getting by, and that was followed by a great save made by Ter Stegen to put us up in the penalty shootout. But this is where things would start to fall apart. Neymar stepped up for his penalty, and it was unfortunately saved by Akinfeev. But that was absolutely no problem for Ter Stegen as he saved their second penalty, keeping them on 0. And next up was Ivan Rakitic, and he stepped up and he smashed the ball directly into the post, meaning we had missed again. But once again, Ter Stegen was here to save the day. He guessed the right direction and he had saved 3 of their penalties. So next up, it was Lionel Messi's turn. No way he would miss from the spot. He sent the ball left, and it did go in. So now we were up 2 penalties, and Ter Stegen had saved all 3 of their shots. No way we're going to mess this up, right? Well, Moscow would step up to take their next penalty, and they would successfully make it. So Piqué was next up to finish off the game, but his penalty was unfortunately saved. So another chance to win the game, Moscow stepped up and he fired it down the middle, meaning all of a sudden the game was tied 2 penalties each. And just when we needed it most, Serge Aurier stepped up for his penalty and he hit it wide left of the post. All of a sudden we were in a position to lose this match. So all Moscow needed to do was put this penalty away. But Ter Stegen actually ended up saving this penalty, meaning we had another chance. So next up was Jordi Alba, and his penalty went straight down the middle and was saved easily by Akinfeev, putting us again in a position to lose. So it was now Moscow's turn, and they were not going to miss from there. We had unfortunately been knocked out of the round of 16 to Moscow, despite Ter Stegen saving 4 penalties. That was the worst display of a penalty shootout I think I've ever witnessed, and just embarrassing stuff. But we're just going to have to move on, learn from our mistakes, and continue on in the rebuild. So taking a look back at La Liga, thanks to huge wins against Valencia as well as Sevilla, by the end of the season, we had won La Liga on top, 83 points, ahead of Real Madrid in second place on 81 points. So in our first season, we had managed to win La Liga. That's a great start. So not the worst start in the world, but we definitely need to improve for season 2. In the Copa del Rey, Real Madrid went on to win that as we went out early to Real Betis. And Bayern Munich would go on to win the UCL title ahead of Borussia Dortmund. So overall, not a bad season. Lionel Messi scored 21 goals and 12 assists, a decent return. Luis Suarez only had 21 goal contributions. But Neymar, on the other hand, was absolutely killing it this year. Over 40 goal contributions, 26 goals. He had an incredible season 1 for us. Hopefully he can continue that in season 2. All right, season 2, this is what the team looks like. I like the growth out of a lot of players. Andre Gomez is up to an 89 already. I'm telling you, he was crazy back in the day. But looking at some upgrades, I think Rakitic is a spot I want to focus in on. He is 29 years old, so he's basically plateaued. He's not going to go up many ratings overall. As well as maybe bringing in a new center back for PK. PK is 30 years old, so I think I could go younger there. But I'm not really sure who to bring in for this season. But before we can make any transfers, we had some players that had their contracts expiring. And one of them was Lionel Messi, and we needed to keep him around, obviously. And luckily, after offering him a new contract, he accepted. Very nice. He needs to stay for at least a couple more seasons. And we have our first piece of business on the season. It is the French center back Jeremy Mathieu. He's headed off to Real Sociedad for only $6 million. That's all we could get for him. And next up, we have another departure out of the club. I needed to raise some more funds, so we're sending Denis Suarez off to Arsenal for $34 million, a pretty decent price, which should allow us to bring in some new signings. And we have our first player into the club. It is someone I've been thinking about signing this entire rebuild, Philippe Coutinho. He was heading to Barcelona around this time in real life, but we're going to make him an absolutely amazing player. We sent $75 million Liverpool's way, and they accepted it. So he is going to be put into the team at right center mid, and we're going to move him up to a cam to form a little triangle in our midfield. He's going to be a great player. But before we could go any further, we have a potential first trophy of the season, the Supercopa. It was against Real Madrid, and in the first leg, it was a 3-1 victory. And in the second leg, it ended up being another 2-1 victory, which means that we had won the Supercopa 5-2 on aggregate, our first trophy of the season. We're off to a great start. But looking back at the transfers, Andres Iniesta was very upset at the club for some reason. I wanted to keep him around until he retired, but before I know it, he had been transferred out of the club off to Chelsea. We had sold him for $31 million. I wanted to keep him around. I'm not really sure why he wanted to leave. But anyways, we decided to bring in a backup winger, former Wonderkid Hesse from PSG. We signed him for $30 million. He'll be a nice backup in case anyone gets injured. So that was it, the end of the transfer window. That was all of our business that we took place this opening window. This is how the team looks. Coutinho is in at midfield. I decided against getting a new center back because I think PK and Umtiti are going to do fine for now, and I'm not really sure who to get instead. But I do really like the team going into the season. We need to win the treble this season. And looking at our UCL group, we had Bayer Leverkusen, Fenerbahce, and CSKA Moscow. And in those matches, we won against Fenerbahce, another victory against Moscow, a very solid 2-0 victory against Leverkusen, another 2-0 victory against Moscow, a win against Fenerbahce, as well as our first draw 1-1 to Bayern Leverkusen. So at the end of the UCL group stage, we had absolutely crushed it. We went undefeated, 5 wins, 1 draw, 16 points on the group stage. We were cruising through to the round of 16. But having a look back at La Liga, despite big wins against Real Madrid, Real Sociedad, Malaga, and Valencia, we were sitting in 4th place come January 1st. But on the bright side, we were only 3 points behind first place Atletico Madrid, so we weren't in that bad of a spot on paper. But sadly, in January, in our 3-0 victory against Las Palmas, Luis Suarez got injured. And unfortunately, he was out for the next 4 months, a devastating blow to our team. So because of this, we decided to go in for a backup striker, and it was none other than Wilfried Bony, one of my favorite players. We sent 22 million to Manchester City and they accepted, so we have a brand new backup striker who's going to have to play for a little bit for Luis Suarez. And that was our only piece of business in the January transfer window. So next up, we had the Copa del Rey semifinals, and in the first leg against Sevilla, it was a 3-1 victory. But before we could get into the second leg, Wilfried Bony, who we just signed, had just gotten injured for 8 weeks. Another devastating blow, so Munier is going to have to step up as our next striker in line. That's devastating. We just signed him. But in the second leg, it ended up being a 1-0 victory, meaning we had punched our ticket through to the Copa del Rey final against Real Madrid, but we're going to have to wait on that till the end of the season. So having a look at the Champions League round of 16, we were up against Dortmund, and in the first leg, it was a 2-2 draw to start us off. But luckily, in the second leg, it ended up being a 3-2 victory, putting us through 5-4 on aggregate, a very tough battle. And in the quarterfinals, we were up against Arsenal. And in the first leg, it was an absolute stomp down, a 4-1 victory against Arsenal, a great way to start off any first leg. And in the second leg, it ended up being a 1-1 draw, but it didn't matter. We were through, cruising into the semifinals. And in the semifinals, we were up against a surprising opponent of Olympique Lyon. And in the first leg, it was a 3-1 victory, a great start to the semifinals. And for the second leg versus Olympique Lyon, it ended up being a 1-1 draw, meaning that we were through to the UCL final, our first one. But before we got into the UCL final, we had a massive game against Real Madrid, which could very much decide who wins La Liga. This was a very important match. And in that very important match against Real Madrid, it ended up being a 1-0 victory. Messi with the game winner, 1-0 against Real Madrid. A huge result. And with Real Madrid losing their last game of the season, the door was wide open. We were 3 points behind them going into the last game of the season. But fortunately, our goal difference was higher than theirs, so if we can get a 3 points out of our last game, we will win La Liga. And in that final match, we played Getafe, and the result of the match was a stopping 5-0 victory against Getafe, meaning that we had ended up winning La Liga just barely over Real Madrid, both of us on 90 points, but we ended up winning on goal difference. An incredible season, our second trophy of the season, a perfect spot for our treble. And we have already won 2 trophies this season, and our last 2 matches are against Real Madrid in the Copa del Rey final, as well as the Champions League final, a chance at another 2 trophies this season. And first up, we had the Copa del Rey final against Real Madrid. But unfortunately, Luis Suarez and Umtiti both had injuries, but they're not going to be able to be back for this match, but they should be back for the Champions League final, so that's going to be good. Wilfried Bony is going to have to be in his place for this match. And in the Copa del Rey final against Real Madrid, it was a 1-0 victory. Going into extra time, it looks like it was a penalty from Andre Gomez. We had won our 3rd trophy of the season, but we still needed one more. And this is it, the Champions League final. It is against Bayern Munich, our chance to complete our treble. I know it would be 4 trophies, but we need the Champions League title. But luckily, Luis Suarez is back and healthy, as well as Umtiti as our center back, so those are 2 big additions back into the team. So here we are, the Champions League final against Bayern Munich. This is going to be a very tough battle, but I have a lot of faith in our team. If we can win this match, we'll be in an absolutely brilliant position to win our treble on this season. And it took until the 20th minute for our first opportunity. Andre Gomez was fed through on goal, but Manuel Neuer came up with a huge save to stop us going up and keeping it level at 0-0. But only 10 minutes later, Luis Suarez was found in the box, whose shot somehow got past the defender, and it could not have gone more top corner than it did. An absolutely amazing finish from the Uruguayan. Even in the replay, it was above the GoPro. What an amazing shot to put us up 1-0 in our very first Champions League final. So as we headed into halftime, it was 1-0 in favor of us. We just needed to hold out for the rest of the game. And in the 70th minute, we had another great opportunity to score. Neymar was through on goal, but another great save from Manuel Neuer, pushing it above the crossbar, somehow keeping us out, keeping the game at 2-0. And only 10 minutes later, Neymar was through again, but unfortunately, he was caught up by Renato Sanchez, so the shot was deflected wide of the post. But shortly after, Messi crossed the ball into Wilfried Bony, whose header put us up 2-0. He had an open header at the back post. He was not going to miss from there. None other than Wilfried Bony getting on the scoreboard. You love to see it. That puts us up 2-0 in the dying minutes of the match. Brilliant. Just a great goal. So with the final whistle being blown, we had won our first Champions League title 2-0 against Bayern Munich, completing off 4 trophies won this season. That's way better than a treble, but we still have to do it back to back. So don't worry, we'll be back for next season. So here we are into season 3. This is what the team looks like. It's absolutely phenomenal. The attack, obviously, and the midfield is amazing. Umtiti has grown up to an 86, which I'm very surprised about, but he's actually turned into a genuine starter for this team. In terms of upgrades for the starting 11, I'm not really sure. I might look to bring in a couple more bench pieces, though. We also need to bring in a new goalkeeper, as Ter Stegen and Masip are the only ones left on the roster, as Claudio Bravo's contract last year expired and we let him walk. As well as we had a bunch of contracts with 1 year left on their deal, and one of those was Luis Suarez. But luckily, after offering him a new contract, he accepted, so he was going to be here for the remainder of the rebuild. But someone who wasn't going to be here was Andre Ter Stegen. He had refused to accept his new contract and said he doesn't want to receive any more offers for a new contract. So just like that, he was added to the transfer list, and it didn't take long for us to give him a move away from the club. He is heading to Arsenal for 50 million. We're just going to have to look for a brand new goalkeeper instead. And there was one man that I had in mind the entire time. It was David De Gea. We're signing him from Manchester United for 75 million. This is prime David De Gea. He's going to be an amazing addition for this team. 92 overall. What a player he was. We decided to bring in another backup goalie as well. This time it was Polish goalkeeper Szczesny, playing for Barcelona right now. We signed him from Arsenal for 14 million, a decent backup goalkeeper. So first up, we had our first chance at a trophy, the Supercopa against Real Madrid, and in the first leg, it was a 1-1 draw. But unfortunately, in the second leg, we ended up losing 1-0 in the Supercopa. Which was not the worst thing in the world, because only a couple days later we have the Copa Europe final, which I'm about 99% sure this is the Super Cup because we won the Champions League last year, and I think Valencia won the Europa League, so this trophy would also count for our treble. And in that match against Valencia, it was a 3-0 victory, Messi with a brace. That is a trophy for the treble. That is one done. I'm glad to get that out of the way. So we have reached deadline day and there is no more business to be taken place. We have bought De Gea and Szczesny as our backup goalie, and that is our only business of the window. So this is the team for Season 3. Going into it, the growth is absolutely amazing. The only hole is probably Umtiti, but he is young enough for him to grow over the course of the season. He's actually surprised me a lot on his growth, but the rest of the team just looks amazing. We have great depth on the bench. This team, we should be able to win the treble this season, and with one trophy already down, we just have to purely focus on La Liga and the UCL. Let's get into this season. But almost immediately as we got into the season, Luis Suarez has once again gotten injured. This seems to be a recurring theme. All 3 seasons he's gotten injured. This time he's out for 4 months, which is rather unfortunate, but we are in the first half of the season, so he should be back for the second half where we should be winning most of our trophies. So with that unfortunate news, Wilfried Bony is going to have to take over for at least the first half of the season. And looking at our Champions League group, we were in a much harder group than we were used to. Napoli, Benfica, and Austrian side FK Australia Ven. A lot harder of a group, especially with Napoli and Benfica, but I definitely am confident going into this group. And in the group stage, we started off with a 2-0 victory against Benfica, followed by a 2-0 victory to FK Austria, a 2-0 victory to Napoli, a astonishing 6-0 victory against FK Austria, a 2-1 loss to Benfica, and finally a 1-1 draw to Napoli to end off the group stage matches. So at the end of the group stage, we were on top on 13 points in a 3-horse race, Napoli on 11 points and Benfica on 10, with FK Austria on 0 points with minus 13 goal difference. But we did manage to go through a pretty decent result against some okay opponents, but just embarrassing from FK Austria. So as we hit January 1st, we were on top of La Liga on 35 points. Real Madrid were off the pace on 30 points. We were in a great spot, the best we have been in so far come January. We just needed to keep this form up for the rest of the season. And luckily, Luis Suarez was back from his injury, so he should be able to finish out the rest of this rebuild. Hopefully, with no injuries. And as we hit deadline day, there was no business made besides we loaned out Vermaelen as well as the right back Vidal, but that was it. We're into the second half of the season. So unfortunately, my UCL group stage file corrupted, but we did manage to cruise through that like we had for the previous 2 seasons. So now we were facing Vitesse in the round of 16, a very surprising opponent. And in the first leg, it was only a 1-0 victory, but a victory nonetheless. And in the second leg, it was a 2-0 victory, meaning we were through to the quarterfinals. And in the quarterfinals, we were up against a very tough matchup, our rivals Real Madrid. This was going to be a very tough matchup. And in the first leg, it ended up being a 1-1 draw, so everything came down to the second leg. And in that second leg, it ended up being a 2-0 victory, putting us through against Real Madrid into the semi-finals. And our opponents for those semi-finals was Juventus, another tough opponent. But in the first leg, it was a 3-0 victory, an amazing start to any first leg. And in the second leg, we did not have to do much. It ended up being a 1-1 draw, meaning we were through to the UCL final. But in that match, none other than Luis Suarez got injured once again. This time, he was out for 8 weeks, so it was very questionable whether or not he would be there for the UCL final. But shifting gear back to La Liga, thanks to clutch wins against Valencia, Atletico Madrid, as well as Real Sociedad, meant that with only 2 games left on the season, we were sitting on top of La Liga. And thanks to goal difference, if we won either of our last 2 games, we were champions of La Liga. So in the next match against Las Palmas, it ended up being a 3-1 victory, meaning that we were La Liga champions. So Barcelona lifted the trophy, a great feeling for the entire team. We were in prime position for our treble going into the UCL final. But first, we had the Copa del Rey final against Valencia this time, and it was a crushing 4-0 victory, meaning our 3rd trophy of the season before we even got into the UCL. What an amazing season that it has been. So in the Champions League final, we were up against Bayer Leverkusen. I feel like I always go up against them, but they should have a decent team at this point. But this is what our team looks like going into the UCL final at the end of Season 3. It just looks incredible. I love what we did over the course of this rebuild. But if you've been enjoying this video, make sure to like and subscribe down below. We are on the road to 1,000 subscribers, and we are so close to hitting that goal, and I'm so grateful and appreciative that we are that close. But anyways, let's get into the UCL final. Here we are, the UCL final against Bayer Leverkusen. They should have some decent players like Bernd Leno in goal. He used to be a beast, but I still think our team is going to be absolutely amazing, and we should cruise through to victory here. And in the 18th minute, Neymar had the ball out wide, and he cut inside and performed one of the most Neymar flops I've ever seen, drawing a penalty early on into the match. And it was none other than Lionel Messi to step up and take this penalty. He sent the ball to the left, the goalkeeper was rooted to the spot, and we were up 1-0 in the UCL final. I finally learned how to take penalties, took me a while, but that was a great start to this match. We were up 1-0. And it wasn't too much after, Neymar found Wilfried Bony, threw on goal, and he was not going to miss from there. He seems to keep popping up in these crucial matches. Wilfried Bony slotted it away against Bernd Leno, putting us up 2-0 in only the 32nd minute of the UCL final. Just a great first half that we have been going through. And outside of one decent chance from Andre Gomez making a Bernd Leno save, as we went into halftime, it was 2-0. All we needed to do was finish out the game. We were cruising. And that is exactly what we did. Outside of some pretty lackluster chances from us, Bayer Leverkusen were settling into the game. They had a couple of chances, but it just was not enough to get past David De Gea, which meant that by the end of full time, we ended up becoming the UCL champions. We had completed the quadruple back-to-back somehow. Barcelona lifted the UCL title once again. What a brilliant team. What a great rebuild. And if you are still here, like I said before, we're on the road to 1,000 subscribers. Make sure to subscribe and like down below. I'd really appreciate it. And also, tell me some rebuild ideas in the comments. I would love to see them. But thank you all so much for watching. I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.